Somewhere between the morning news and your last scroll through social media, you've probably had the thought, why does it seem like the most arrogant, ruthless, or unethical people are the ones who get ahead? The boss who manipulates everyone yet climbs higher. The influencer who thrives on drama yet gains more followers. The politician who twists truth yet wins votes. And then there's you, trying to do the right thing, build something honest, show up with integrity, yet it feels like you're running uphill while others are gliding. This isn't just an observation. It's a gut-level frustration, a quiet tension inside people who strive to be good but feel like the world rewards something else entirely. It makes us question whether we're missing some kind of secret rule book, or if decency is a disadvantage in a world obsessed with power, visibility, and control. It's not a new question. In fact, it haunted Friedrich Nietzsche over a century ago. The philosopher, often misunderstood as a cynic, looked into the abyss of human power structures and asked, what if morality itself was a product of the weak? What if we've been conditioned to see strength and willpower as immoral, while secretly resenting those who dare to use them? Nietzsche didn't just pose these questions from a place of detachment. He saw society splitting into two opposing forces, what he called slave morality and master morality. One driven by guilt, humility, and self-denial. The other by ambition, vitality, and unapologetic self-assertion. It's unsettling, because it means that what we've been taught to call bad might simply be powerful, and what we call good might be survival in disguise. This idea doesn't just live in dusty philosophy books. It pulses through our workplaces, our relationships, our art, our politics, and even within ourselves. There's a reason stories of betrayal, dominance, and manipulation fill our most beloved TV dramas. There's a reason we're both horrified and hypnotized by characters like Walter White, Cersei Lannister, or Jordan Belfort. They echo something ancient, something real, a part of us that wonders, is that what it takes? This conversation is not about glorifying cruelty. It's about understanding why power is often misunderstood, and why our deepest frustration might come not from seeing bad people succeed, but from not understanding the rules of the game they're playing. History has seen empires rise on ruthlessness. Myths warned us of gods who were proud, jealous, and hungry. Even sacred texts wrestled with the idea, why do the wicked prosper? This is not a simple topic, but if we're willing to look deeper, not just at the world, but within ourselves, we might find something more powerful than outrage. We might find clarity. So today, we step into the mind of Nietzsche, not to agree or disagree, but to listen, and to understand why the success of the worst people might have less to do with evil, and more to do with unspoken truths about how the world works. To understand why Nietzsche's provocative ideas still echo in our hearts today, we have to go back, far before Nietzsche himself, to the roots of how humanity has defined morality, power, and success. These aren't new questions. They've lived in the bones of civilizations for thousands of years. Let's start with a core paradox. Most societies have always preached virtue while rewarding dominance. Religions have long exalted humility, sacrifice, and compassion. Yet, history books are filled with the names of conquerors, kings, and revolutionaries, men and women who wielded ambition like a blade and carved their names into the world, often at great moral cost. This duality between moral idealism and realpolitik has been around since humans first formed tribes. In ancient Mesopotamia, the earliest laws like the Code of Hammurabi were concerned with justice, fairness, and divine order, but enforcement was brutal. Order was kept through fear and dominance. If you looked behind the language of fairness, you'd often find the cold hand of control. In Greek mythology, the gods themselves were deeply flawed. Jealous, vengeful, proud, they did not operate by human ethics, yet they were revered. Heroes like Achilles were praised for their strength, not their kindness. In the Iliad, honor was measured in glory and victory, not compassion. The powerful weren't expected to be good. They were expected to be bold. Even in the philosophies of ancient China, we see this contrast. Confucius emphasized virtue, harmony, and humility. But legalism, which shaped much of imperial China's governance, focused on strict order, discipline, and the idea that people are naturally selfish and must be controlled by a strong state. The same pattern played out in medieval Europe. Christianity taught that the meek shall inherit the earth. Yet feudal lords exploited peasants, kings ruled by divine right, and the church itself amassed enormous wealth and power, often by manipulating fear and guilt. This isn't just hypocrisy, it reflects an ancient tension. Societies need moral codes to function, but they also need strong leaders to survive. And sometimes those two forces are in conflict. Enter Nietzsche. In the 19th century, amidst the collapse of religious authority and the rise of industrial power, Nietzsche saw a cultural sickness. He believed that Western morality, especially the Christian ideal of humility and self-sacrifice, had begun to poison human vitality. He saw people shrinking themselves, denying their desires, afraid to assert their will. He called this slave morality. It's a morality born out of weakness, he argued. When you don't have power, you start to call power evil. You begin to see pride as sin, desire as dangerous, strength as oppressive. Instead, you elevate submission, obedience, and suffering. Nietzsche contrasted this with master morality, the morality of the noble, the strong, the creative. It values power, ambition, and the ability to shape the world according to one's will. Not cruelty for its own sake, but strength unapologetically used. For Nietzsche, this wasn't about domination. It was about life affirmation, the raw force of becoming who you are, unafraid of judgment. This is where it gets tricky, because when people hear master morality, they often associate it with tyranny or fascism. But Nietzsche wasn't endorsing cruelty. He was warning us about the dangers of resentment, the hidden bitterness that builds up when people deny their desires and project their envy onto others. He called this resentment, a kind of moral rebranding born from envy and powerlessness. According to Nietzsche, slave morality creates a culture of quiet revenge, one where those who feel weak secretly hate those who don't, and moralize their hatred as righteousness. Sound familiar? Think about modern cancel culture, or passive-aggressive leadership, or virtue signaling without real integrity. These are symptoms of that resentment, when morality becomes a mask for unacknowledged frustration, a way to punish rather than elevate. But Nietzsche wasn't just a critic. He was a prophet of transformation. He dreamed of the Übermensch, the Overman, a being who transcends both slave and master morality, someone who doesn't dominate others, but who masters themselves, who creates new values, lives with radical authenticity, and refuses both victimhood and arrogance. Now, let's bring this closer to our time. In today's culture, we still wrestle with these moral paradoxes. We tell kids to be kind and humble, but we reward charisma, status, and confidence. We elevate leaders who break rules, then shame people for being too assertive. We praise collaboration, but secretly admire those who stand alone. We are torn between the morality we preach and the instincts we reward. In the corporate world, we see this all the time. Companies claim to care about ethics and empathy, but who gets promoted? Often the boldest voice in the room, not the most ethical one. Studies in organizational psychology even suggest that narcissists are more likely to rise to leadership positions, not because they are more competent, but because they believe they are and they convince others of it too. Social media amplifies this further. It rewards controversy, confidence, and performance over nuance and humility. The algorithm doesn't care if someone is wise. It cares if people are watching. The result? Loud voices drown out thoughtful ones, and success becomes a spectacle. But this doesn't mean we're doomed to a world ruled by the worst among us. What Nietzsche offered wasn't a celebration of darkness, it was a challenge. He forced us to confront the uncomfortable truth that maybe the good versus evil narrative is too simple. Maybe the real battle is between unconscious weakness and conscious strength, between repression and integration, between living by borrowed values and creating your own. Because the truth is, the worst people don't succeed because they're bad. They succeed because they understand power, even if they misuse it. And if those of us with integrity refuse to understand power, then power will keep falling into the wrong hands. This doesn't mean we have to become ruthless, but it does mean we have to stop being naive. Power is not evil. It's neutral. It's what you do with it that defines its legacy. And until we learn to wield it with wisdom, the world will keep rewarding those who do, no matter their motives. So, the question becomes, can we become powerful without losing our soul? Can we hold strength and softness at the same time? That's the deeper invitation. To understand why certain types of people, often the ones we label as toxic, narcissistic, or ruthless, seem to succeed more often, we need to look beyond philosophy and into psychology. Specifically, we need to explore how human behavior, perception, and social systems unconsciously reward traits that aren't always virtuous, but are incredibly effective. Let's begin with the confidence-competence effect. Psychologist David Dunning and his colleague Justin Kruger uncovered a fascinating cognitive bias, now called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the phenomenon where people with low ability in a particular area overestimate their competence, while those with high ability tend to underestimate it. In simple terms, the less you know, the more certain you often feel. And the more you know, the more aware you are of your limitations. In competitive environments, whether it's a job interview, a boardroom, or a political debate, certainty is seductive. Confidence is often mistaken for competence. People are drawn to those who appear sure of themselves, even if that confidence isn't backed by depth. This means that bold, overconfident individuals, who may lack self-awareness or empathy, are often elevated. They speak louder. They act faster. They get noticed. Meanwhile, reflective, thoughtful individuals may hesitate. They question themselves. They want to be right more than they want to win. But in a world where speed and certainty are often rewarded, that pause can look like weakness. Now pair that with narcissism, a trait that in excess can be destructive, but in mild forms is often rewarded. Narcissists tend to have a grandiose sense of self, a craving for admiration, and a willingness to manipulate others to maintain their image. But here's the catch. They're often charismatic, high energy, vision-driven. Research shows that narcissists are more likely to be perceived as leaders, especially in short-term interactions. This doesn't mean they're always bad leaders. Some narcissists build empires, but their success often depends on whether they develop emotional intelligence along the way. Unfortunately, many don't. They focus on control, not connection, and yet they rise. Because modern systems, capitalism, social media, corporate hierarchies are built to reward visibility, not virtue, performance, not depth. Let's go deeper. According to Jungian psychology, we all carry archetypes within us, universal patterns of behavior. One of these is the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves we repress, often because it doesn't align with our social identity. Anger, pride, greed, even ambition, these often get buried, especially in cultures that prioritize politeness or conformity. But here's the paradox. Those who embrace their shadow, who integrate their darker instincts rather than suppress them, often seem more whole. They carry a kind of magnetic force. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The worst people seem to succeed not because they're evil, but because they've made peace with parts of themselves others are still running from. That doesn't make them better, but it does make them more complete in the psychological sense. They've accessed the full spectrum of their will. They're not afraid to take up space, to assert, to want. Even if they do it unethically, the energy behind it is strong. Now compare this to the person who's been conditioned to be good above all. They've been taught to suppress their needs, to doubt their voice, to put others first. While this can create kindness and sensitivity, it can also breed resentment, burnout, and powerlessness, especially in a world that rewards those who ask boldly and take unapologetically. This is why boundary work is so essential. Psychologist Dr. Gabor Mate points out that many people confuse love with self-erasure, especially those raised in environments where love had to be earned through compliance. Over time, this creates adults who feel guilty for asserting themselves, who don't know how to say no, who give away their power to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, those who never learned guilt, or who learned to override it, move through the world more freely, not always kindly, but effectively. In sociology, this is mirrored in the concept of social capital. It's the invisible currency of status, relationships, and influence. People who can navigate social networks, charm authority figures, or project confidence build this capital faster. It doesn't require integrity, it just requires skill. And that skill is often taught, sometimes explicitly, sometimes through observation. Kids raised in high-power environments where networking, persuasion, and self-promotion are modeled learn how to play the game. Kids raised in environments where obedience is emphasized over initiative may grow up brilliant but invisible. So, what do we do with this knowledge? Do we surrender to cynicism? Do we accept that the world only rewards manipulation and self-interest? No. That would be a shallow reading of everything we've just explored, because the truth is, success built on pure ego is fragile. Narcissistic leaders may rise quickly, but they often fall. Their relationships suffer. Their teams break. Their legacies crack. What lasts is integration. When power is guided by wisdom, when confidence is matched by humility, when the shadow is not exiled but mastered. This is what psychologist Abraham Maslow called self-actualization. It's not about being perfect, it's about becoming whole. Maslow believed that the healthiest people are those who transcend both ego and fear. They are creative, autonomous, and deeply ethical, not because they follow rules, but because they understand them. They know how to say no without guilt. They know how to lead without domination. They move through the world with presence, not performance. This is also what ancient traditions tried to teach. In Sufism, the path to truth begins with confronting the nafs, the egoic self, not to destroy it, but to purify it, to understand its cravings and illusions. Only then can one lead with the heart, not just the will. In Taoism, the sage doesn't strive or manipulate. They move with the Tao, the natural flow. They lead by example, not force. But this quiet strength is not weakness. It's power grounded in harmony. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a new question, one more important than why do the worst people seem to succeed? The better question is, what does it look like to succeed as a whole person? Can we learn to embody power and compassion? Can we speak truth without cruelty, set boundaries without guilt, pursue greatness without losing grace? This is the deeper work. Not rejecting power, but reclaiming it. Not mimicking toxic behavior, but understanding its root, so we can evolve beyond it. Because the world doesn't just need fewer bad people in charge. It needs more integrated, awake, emotionally intelligent people who know their own worth and aren't afraid to live it. The hidden cost of spectating power. Why our silence matters. Let's be honest. Most of us don't identify as the worst people. We're not plotting domination. We're not stepping on others to get ahead. But in a world where manipulation and ruthless ambition often seem to win, Many of us adopt a quieter form of survival. We become spectators, observers, bystanders to power. And that silence, that shrinking, comes with a cost. There's a psychological concept called learned helplessness, first studied by Martin Seligman. It's what happens when a person or animal is exposed to pain or difficulty, repeatedly, without any sense of control. Over time, they stop trying. Even when the doors open, they don't walk through. Even when help is possible, they no longer believe in it. The modern world, in subtle ways, trains us into this state. We watch corruption go unpunished. We see influencers rise on empty values. We witness workplace bullies get promoted while the quiet workers are overlooked. And we start to tell ourselves, maybe this is just how it is. But here's the twist. Each time we silently normalize dysfunction, it doesn't just affect others. It changes us. It erodes our sense of agency. It numbs our moral instincts. It rewires our nervous system to expect less, not just from the world, but from ourselves. We stop speaking up in meetings. We second-guess our own ideas. We call it being realistic, but it's really just a slow betrayal of our own voice. That's not humility. That's quiet harm. Nietzsche warned us of this kind of moral fatigue. He spoke of the last man, a figure who, after centuries of struggle and idealism, chooses comfort over greatness, safety over meaning. He's not evil. He's just tired, apathetic. He stops reaching. And yet, buried inside him is something wild, something sacred, the same thing that lives inside you, the part that knows you were made for more than spectating. So, what do we do with this? We start where power actually lives, in the micro moments. When you set a boundary instead of apologizing for your existence, you reclaim power. When you share a difficult truth with softness and clarity, you embody power. When you refuse to mock what others love, when you create instead of critique, when you offer presence instead of pretense, you are redefining what it means to succeed. We've been trained to think that only big gestures change the world. That unless you're a CEO or an activist or a viral success, your choices don't matter. But here's the truth. Systems are built on habits, and habits are built on individual nervous systems. When you choose integrity over impression, someone else sees that. Maybe your child, maybe a friend, maybe a colleague quietly watching. You don't always see the ripple, but it's there. And sometimes the ripple is within. Your own nervous system registers. I am safe when I'm real. Your body exhales. I don't have to perform to belong. Your inner world expands. There's a place for me here, even in my truth. This is not easy work. In fact, it's revolutionary. Because the dominant culture doesn't want you to believe that your presence matters. It wants you numb, distracted, reactive. It wants you too burned out to care. It wants you scrolling endlessly, comparing endlessly, doubting endlessly. But the deeper part of you, the part still reading this, that part wants freedom. And freedom isn't loud. It's not flashy. It's not angry all the time. Freedom is knowing that your soul doesn't need permission to matter, that your worth isn't up for debate, that your alignment is more valuable than any external applause. Let's bring this back to the original question. Why do the worst people seem to succeed? Because they're willing to do what others won't. Not in the best ways, but in the boldest ones. They speak up, even when wrong. They take space, even when unearned. They move forward, even without clarity. And what if we flipped that? What if the best people started doing what they usually avoid? What if you spoke your truth, even when your voice shook? What if you took up space with your vision? Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. What if you moved forward with humility and clarity and heart, and refused to apologize for the fact that you care? What if you started doing what the worst people do, except with soul? Take that into your day, into your decisions, into your silence. Next time you want to shrink, ask, what am I protecting by staying quiet? Whose voice gets louder when mine disappears? What would I say or do if I fully believed I belonged? And then act from that place. That's how you stop spectating power. That's how you stop normalizing dysfunction. That's how you start rewriting the story, not just for the world, but for your own nervous system. Because here's the secret. The worst people don't want you to know. Once the best people start showing up fully, the game changes. Not overnight, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, deeply. And that kind of change, it lasts. When we grow up watching the wrong people win, something subtle but profound happens inside us. A kind of soul fatigue sets in. We start to question the worth of kindness. We wonder whether our empathy is a weakness. We shrink our values, slowly and silently, just to survive in a world that seems tilted in favor of those who shout louder, want more, and care less. Let's make this personal for a moment. Maybe you've worked in a place where the person who climbs the fastest isn't the one who helps the most, but the one who self-promotes the loudest. Maybe you've poured yourself into a relationship, given your best, only to be discarded by someone who seemed to rise untouched by empathy. Maybe you've been the quiet one in the meeting, watching someone else echo your idea with more flair, and get the credit. These moments don't just sting. They chip away at something deeper, our belief that the world is fair. Over time, we may begin to internalize dangerous narratives. That being good means being invisible. That humility is just another word for powerlessness. That love, patience, and self-restraint are only valuable when someone else validates them. And here's where the real damage starts. Not outside, but within. Psychologically, this disillusionment often triggers learned helplessness, a state discovered by psychologist Martin Seligman. It happens when people repeatedly experience situations where their actions don't seem to make a difference. Eventually, they stop trying. Even when freedom or success becomes possible, they no longer believe it's available to them. The door opens, but they don't walk through it. This is compounded by what's known as cognitive dissonance. When we believe that good people win, but constantly see the opposite, our minds twist themselves into knots trying to make sense of it. Some of us start blaming ourselves, thinking we must not be good enough. Others become cynical, abandoning their values altogether. Either way, the soul fractures. Relationships suffer too. People who feel repeatedly overlooked or mistreated often start carrying unspoken resentment. It's like an emotional plaque that builds up silently. This can lead to passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, or martyrdom. Partners become caretakers, friends become competitors, and communities break under the pressure of unacknowledged pain. In careers, people with strong ethics may hesitate to take leadership roles. They may second-guess themselves. They worry that power will corrupt them, or that they don't look like a leader. Meanwhile, others with far less self-awareness step forward, confidently shaping organizations in their image. The result? Workplaces that reward performance over substance and leave integrity in the margins. Even more quietly, this dynamic affects our self-concept. When the world keeps rewarding traits we've been told are wrong, vanity, manipulation, shameless ambition, we begin to wonder if we've misunderstood the rules of the game. It's not just a crisis of identity, it's a crisis of reality. We question if our kindness is naivety. We wonder if our boundaries are selfish. We start mimicking behaviors we don't even believe in, just to survive. This psychological mimicry has a name: identification with the aggressor, a concept introduced by psychoanalyst Anna Freud. It happens when people, especially those who have been powerless for a long time, start unconsciously copying the traits of those who hurt them. Not because they admire them, but because their psyche believes it's the only way to stay safe. We see this in children who grow up in authoritarian households and become rigid adults. We see it in sensitive people who become stone-faced managers. We see it in cycles of trauma, where victims become perpetrators, not out of malice, but out of a desperate instinct to survive. Historically, we've seen this play out on massive scales. Revolutionaries who became tyrants. Empires built on the promise of liberation, only to become new machines of oppression. Religions that began with love and became vehicles for guilt and control. Even in mythology, this cycle repeats. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, a symbol of knowledge and power, and gave it to humanity. He was punished not for cruelty but for empowering the weak. His story reminds us, power and goodness have always had a strained relationship, and those who try to bridge the two often pay a price. In Sufi stories, there's a figure known as the Qalandar, a mystic who lives outside the rules of society. They are wild, ungoverned, and deeply spiritual. They are misunderstood by the elite and feared by the powerful, but they carry a different kind of success, inner freedom, not wealth or control, but sovereignty of the soul. And that brings us to the deeper emotional consequence of misunderstanding this whole dynamic. We mistake external success for inner worth. We forget that success is a projection, not a proof, that someone can be thriving outwardly and empty inside, that someone can be overlooked by society and still be living in alignment with something sacred. Because success, in the modern world, is often defined by metrics that ignore humanity, follower counts, revenue, applause, but those metrics don't measure self-respect. They don't measure the ability to sleep at night. They don't measure the quiet power of a person who refuses to betray themselves. So we must ask ourselves, what kind of success do we really want? Do we want visibility or vitality, applause or authenticity, control or connection? Because while it's tempting to chase what the world rewards, real fulfillment doesn't come from winning someone else's game. It comes from defining your own and playing it with full presence. And that's not easy, especially when you're surrounded by people who seem to be succeeding by doing the opposite. But here's the thing. The people who appear to win through ruthlessness often pay hidden costs. Their relationships lack depth. Their identities become fragile. Their inner lives, when you really look, are often hollow. They may succeed in systems, but they lose in the soul. Meanwhile, those who do the deep work, who integrate power and integrity, ambition and empathy, build something more durable. Something that doesn't just rise quickly, but lasts. Something that nourishes, not just dominates. So, yes, the world may sometimes elevate the worst people, but that's not the whole story. It's a distorted lens, not a fixed truth. And once you see it clearly, you can begin to make a different choice, not to become louder or colder or more manipulative, but to become clearer, more rooted, more sovereign, to lead from a place that no system can distort, to succeed in a way that includes your wholeness. Because the deepest rebellion is to thrive with integrity, and the highest success is to be fully, unapologetically yourself, in a world that keeps trying to turn you into someone else. Let's begin with a quiet truth. You don't have to become someone else to thrive. You don't need to abandon your empathy, your introspection, your heart, but you do need to learn how to protect them, to ground them in strength, to anchor your values not in idealism, but in embodied power. If we're going to navigate a world where the worst sometimes rise, we must learn how to rise differently, to build an inner architecture that doesn't collapse in the face of pressure, manipulation, or false power. So, what does that look like in practice? First, reclaim your relationship with power. Too many thoughtful people associate power with corruption. They've seen it abused and want no part of it. But power, at its core, is simply the ability to influence reality, starting with your own. It's the energy you bring into a room, the boundaries you hold, the vision you pursue. If you don't claim your power, someone else will. Start by redefining power in your own language. Ask yourself, what does empowered leadership feel like to me? Who in my life models strength with integrity? Where do I give my power away, and why? This reflection isn't just mental, it's spiritual. Journal about it. Meditate on it. Let it live in your body. Because the moment you begin to own your strength, you start moving differently. People feel it, even before you say a word. Second, cultivate self-awareness without self-abandonment. Many emotionally intelligent people get stuck in over-reflection. They replay conversations. They analyze every tone. They bend to accommodate others. This isn't humility. It's self-erasure disguised as empathy. Balance this with what psychologist Kristin Neff calls self-compassion. That means treating yourself like someone you care about, not letting yourself off the hook, but refusing to shame yourself for being human. Try this practice. When you feel criticized, ask, not just, "What did I do wrong?" but also, "What do I need right now?" That second question changes everything. It brings you back to center. Third, strengthen your boundaries. Gently, clearly, consistently. Boundaries are not walls. They are clarity. They are the lines that protect your energy, your time, your values. The worst people often succeed because others don't know how to say no, and they rely on that silence. Practice micro-boundaries first. Decline a request without over-explaining. Pause before replying to an aggressive email. Leave a conversation that feels manipulative. These small actions rebuild your nervous system's sense of safety. Remember, boundaries aren't a rejection of others. They're a deep affirmation of yourself. Fourth, connect to something bigger than your ego. The most resilient people, those who thrive with integrity, often have a spiritual or philosophical anchor. It doesn't have to be religious. It can be found in nature, art, music, or service. But it must be something that reminds you. Your worth is not measured by likes, titles, or outcomes. This is where ancient wisdom becomes practical. In Stoicism, there's a practice called amor fati, the love of one's fate. It means embracing what is rather than resisting it, not in passive resignation but in grounded acceptance. You respond rather than react. You act from principle, not panic. Try this. Each morning, ask yourself, if today brings challenge, how do I want to meet it? If I don't get the result I want, how can I still act with dignity? This mental rehearsal prepares you not just to succeed, but to do so with soul. In Sufi practice, there's a concept called adab, a spiritual etiquette. It's not about being polite. It's about moving through the world with awareness, humility, and grace. It's how you enter a room, how you speak truth, how you carry power, not to dominate, but to uplift. In modern psychology, this overlaps with emotional regulation, the ability to feel deeply without being hijacked by your emotions. Techniques like mindfulness, breathwork, or body-based grounding can help here, but so can old practices. Whirling, chanting, poetry, anything that brings you back to your center. Fifth, refine your inner circle. You cannot do this work alone. You need mirrors, people who see your potential, not just your performance. People who challenge you with love, not shame. People who model a different way to rise. Audit your environment gently. Who drains you? Who energizes you? Who makes you forget your worth? Who helps you remember? Build relationships rooted in mutual growth, not silent competition. Make space for real conversations, not just performative vulnerability. And remember, choosing solitude over shallow connection is not isolation. It's sovereignty. Sixth, embody your vision. Don't just articulate it, live it. We often wait until we feel ready to take bold steps. But integrity isn't built in theory. It's built in motion. Start showing up as the person you want to become, not with pressure, but with presence. If you want to lead, lead in small ways now. If you want to speak truth, begin with one honest sentence. If you want to live with purpose, start by making one choice each day that aligns with your values. Small aligned actions rewire your identity. You don't need to become louder. You need to become clearer. You don't need to chase power. You need to embody presence. That's how you change the story. Not by fighting toxic systems on their own terms, but by modeling something different, by living your truth so powerfully that others feel permission to do the same. And when setbacks come, as they always do, you meet them with the quiet strength of someone who knows that the inner path is not less real, but more. That the deeper victory isn't being seen by the world. It's being witnessed by your own soul. So, what do you practice? Morning grounding. A few minutes to reconnect with your breath, your body, your intention. Boundary journaling. Reflect on where you said yes when you meant no, and how to repair that. Shadow work. Notice the traits you judge in others and ask where they live in you. Vision anchoring. Keep a written reminder of the kind of person you're becoming. Read it when you're tired. These aren't just habits, they're acts of rebellion. In a world that wants you numb, noisy, and disconnected, choosing self-awareness, depth, and integrity is revolutionary. Because the truth is, you don't need to become ruthless to rise. You just need to become whole. And when you do, when you truly embody the fullness of who you are, you'll start to notice something. The world may still reward the worst people sometimes, but it also makes room for the best. Quietly, steadily, in ways you didn't see before. Let's step back now. Breathe. We've walked through history, through psychology, through your inner world. We've questioned why the worst people sometimes rise, and what it cost the rest of us to watch them do it. We've seen how that struggle is not just political or professional. It's personal. It touches something ancient in us. The part of us that still believes that good should be rewarded, that truth should win, that love should matter. And maybe you've realized something along the way. This isn't just about them. It's about us. It's about the silent ways we shrink ourselves, the moments we stay quiet when we want to speak, the times we doubt our depth in a world that celebrates surface. The world has never been fair, not consistently. But that doesn't mean we're powerless, because fairness isn't just something that happens to us. It's something we practice, something we embody, something we carry, even when no one's watching. Nietzsche once said that the world is not a place of justice, but of will, and that those who master their will shape the world. For him, power wasn't evil. It was raw, neutral. It became dangerous only when we stopped doing the inner work to hold it with care. He feared the herd mentality, the way people abandon their own thinking in order to be accepted. He warned us not to become tame, not to let fear disguise itself as virtue. But here's where we take it further. We don't just want to overcome the herd. We want to lead with soul. We want to integrate power and ethics, ambition and presence, courage and compassion. Because we don't want domination. We want impact. We don't want applause. We want meaning. We don't want success if it costs us our integrity. That's the paradox, isn't it? The world rewards the worst people because they play the game without conscience. But the world needs the best people to rise, precisely because we bring a conscience to the game. And that means we must learn to play, not by their rules, but by ours, thoughtfully, strategically, authentically. So what does that mean going forward? It means we stop seeing goodness as passivity. We start seeing it as discipline, as clarity, as presence. It means we stop waiting to be discovered and start claiming our space. We stop assuming that being kind is enough and start developing skill, vision, boundaries, courage. It means we stop believing the lie that the world is too far gone, because if you're still here, still listening, still feeling, still caring, then something in you refuses to give up. And that refusal? That's holy. That's where the change begins. Because for every person who rises by stepping on others, there's someone else rising quietly by lifting others up. For every manipulator who climbs to the top, there's a quiet leader building something sustainable, rooted in trust. For every illusion of success, there's a deeper reality waiting to be reclaimed. And yes, it will take time. The world doesn't always recognize depth at first, But depth is what lasts. Depth is what remains when the applause fades. Depth is what makes you whole. So, in the end, the real question isn't, why do the worst people seem to succeed? The real question is, what kind of success do you want to build? One that imitates the noise, or one that reflects your truth? One that burns out quickly, or one that endures because it's real? You don't need to betray yourself to thrive. You just need to trust that integrity, when paired with strategy, becomes a quiet kind of power, one that reshapes everything it touches. So, let's stop asking whether the world is fair. Let us ask whether we're willing to be the kind of people who make it more fair. Not with slogans, not with shame, but with vision, with consistency, with heart. Because in the end, it's not the worst people who win. It's the ones who stay true and learn how to rise without losing themselves. And that's not weakness. That's mastery. Take a breath. You made it through this journey. A deep dive into power, self-awareness, and what it really means to live with integrity in a world that doesn't always reward it. That alone says something about you. It says you're not here for surface-level answers. You're here for depth, for truth, for tools that actually mean something. And if that resonates, if you felt something shift in you as you listened, remembered, or reflected, then know this: you're not alone. We're building something here. A space for thoughtful people who are done shrinking, done performing, done pretending. A space for those of us who want to grow, not just to win, but to become. People of clarity, of emotional intelligence, of real impact. Because reclaiming your personal power isn't about becoming harder. It's about becoming whole. It's about integrating your depth with your direction, your boundaries with your empathy, your voice with your values. Every video here weaves together modern psychology, historical wisdom, and grounded practices, not to preach, but to offer something useful, something human. Whether it's a Jungian insight, a piece of Sufi wisdom, a journaling prompt, or a story from Nietzsche's darker philosophies, we connect it all back to you, your life, your growth. So if this spoke to you, if it stirred something deeper, consider joining us by subscribing. Not for algorithms, not for vanity metrics, but because growth deserves community. And your journey deserves to be witnessed by people walking the same path. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to be real, to rise without losing ourselves, to lead without imitating the worst of what we've seen. So here's the invitation. Let's keep doing this work, together. Let's unlearn the noise. Let's reclaim the deeper voice inside. And let's build a kind of success that actually feels like freedom. Because when you rise with soul, you don't just succeed. You shift the story. Subscribe, reflect, and return when you're ready. We're not going anywhere. This space is yours.